Welcome back, investors. As we have covered in detail about the NPA and its provisioning in earlier session, those are session number 35 and 36. Let us now discuss about another important elements of this NPA, which are the NCLT and asset reconstruction companies. In May 1991, under Section 10E of Indian Companies Act, to overlook and regulate the business activities and mandatory compliances made by entities in all economic fields and resolve all types of disputes among people and companies in their fields, had formed this quasi judicial establishment called Company Law Board, CLB. Before CLB was formed, these functions were handled by High Court and central government. If CLB cannot resolve issues, then only High Court was approached. But in 2002, the CLB was replaced by newly constituted NCLT, that is the National Company Law Tribunal. NCLTs are specialized courts which have exclusive jurisdiction and is established by Ministry of Corporate Affairs to deal with only corporate affairs. It has reduced the burden on various courts and forums. NCLT has retired judges as well in the panel. So in this NCLT, the T stands for tribunals. So what are tribunals? Tribunals are quasi-judicial bodies dealing specific cases related to Indian corporate affairs. So quasi-judicial in the sense it is not completely a court, but it is acting as a court with not all of its rights, but still it's a court. If NCLT fails to resolve issues, then appeal can be moved to NCLAT, that is National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. If NCLAT can't resolve, then Supreme Court can be approached finally. So as these new courts or quasi judicial authorities has come in, the load of the main courts like Supreme Court has so much reduced and they can effectively manage all the cases to its highest efficiency. Now coming to ARC, that is Asset Reconstruction Company. Banks, as you know, are financial institutions that are engaged principally in business of money lending and money borrowing. The customer base of banking sector is very large and there is also a substantial risk involved in lending money. While the bank always has the option of taking legal action on the defaulting borrowers, it is not always economically feasible to do so. The bank sometimes decides to just cut its losses, clean up its balance sheet, and keep the business moving towards better prospects. This is where our asset reconstruction company ARC pitches in, wherein bank don't wish to involve in asset recovery directly due to large efforts and legalities involved in that. It is not always necessary that a asset reconstruction company is involved in recovering asset, and in India these ARCs are not that active, though there are various renowned names in this. Before starting, let me clarify that a debtor, DBTOR, a debtor is a person, country, or organization that owes money. An ARC is a special type of financial institution that buys the debtors of the bank at a mutually agreed value and attempts to recover the debts or associated securities by itself. ARCs are registered under Reserve Bank of India RBI and regulated under Securitization and Reconstruction of Financial Assets and Enforcement of Securities Interest Act 2002, which is SARFAESI Act 2002. The ARCs takes over a portion of the debts of the bank that qualify to be recognized as NPA. Thus, ARCs are engaged in the business of asset reconstruction or securitization or both. Securitization is the procedure where an issuer designs a marketable financial instrument by merging or pooling various financial assets into one group. The issuer then sells this group of repackaged assets to investors. Securitization offers opportunity for investors and frees up capital for originators, both of which promote liquidity in the marketplace. Some of the well known ARCs in India are JM Financial ARC Limited, that is Asset Reconstruction Company Limited, Reliance Asset Reconstruction Company Limited, Edelweiss Asset Reconstruction Company Limited, India SME Asset Reconstruction Company Limited, Pegasus Asset Reconstruction Private Limited, etc. I will cite here a real case scenario for your further understanding. So here I am taking the case of Tata Steel acquiring Bhushan Steel Group, which later is named as Tata Bhushan Steel Limited, otherwise called Tata BSL. Bridge Bhushan Singhal started Bhushan Steel in 1987 by acquiring a steel plant which was struggling to survive. He entered into steel business along with his sons Neeraj and Sanjay Singhal and brings old steel plant back to life. The company focused on production of secondary steel and its customers were mainly from automobile sector. They had four major plants in Shahidabad, Kopoli, Odisha and Hosur. Bhushan Steel did their business differently from other peers. They utilized sophisticated high-end technologies to support production and used Japanese technology to manufacture steel. This definitely gave them edge over others. Strategy and luck favored the group and they rose up to become the third largest steel producer in India with steel supplied to big names like Maruti Suzuki, Mahindra and Mahindra and Tata Motors. Now where it went wrong. Bhushan Steel tried ways forward to shed their disadvantages of importing most of their input and it restrained and limited their production activities. So they decided to build a new plant in Odisha to address this issue. As the steel prices were booming at that time, banks were really very happy to lend Bhushan Steel for the growth and expansion. In 2005, banks lended huge loans to Bhushan Steel. The Odisha plant was supposed to help Bhushan Steel in controlling the availability of raw materials and ensure enough supply of ore and coal to meet steel production needs. But the financial crisis in 2008 proved to be a huge obstacle for Bhushan Steel. Steel price fell from $1,265 per ton to just $300. Chinese market demand also fell drastically, leaving huge dent in the company's balance sheet. Still, completion of the plant in Odisha seemed to be a ray of hope for Bhushan Steel. First phase of plant construction was completed in 2010. By the end of financial year 2010-2011, company had a debt of 11,404 crore. Still, Bhushan Steel kept borrowing to complete the plant construction. Bhushan Steel and its lenders believed that once the plant reaches full capacity, they can repay debts from their huge profits. But unlike as predicted, huge debt and falling profits dipped company into losses. In 2013, plant witnessed a terrible accident, killing 3 workers and leaving 29 injured. Further, Bhushan Steel borrowed a fresh 18,000 crore with company stocks as collateral. It's also called the pledging of shares, which is normally considered as a big red flag. The interest repayment on debt became irregular as the profits kept vaporizing for Bhushan Steel. Company finally was officially in chaos as the debt rose from 35,710 crore in 2014 to 46,062 crore in 2016. Banks lost its positivity on Bhushan Steel and a forensic audit was put into place which was led by Deloitte. CBI also investigated on this case. CBI investigation even claimed that then CEO of Bhushan Steel, Mr. S.K. Jain, had bribed banks for loan extension and had defaulted more than 100 crores. Stock price fell drastically as the shareholders panicked. In 2014, Bhushan Steel entered bankruptcy court. Bankruptcy, for those who don't know, is a legal proceeding involving a person or business that is unable to repay their outstanding debts. Bankruptcy process begins with a petition filed by debtor who owes, which is most common, or on behalf of creditors, that is lenders, which is less common. All the assets of debtors are measured and evaluated, and these assets may be used to repay a portion of outstanding debt. It is noteworthy that Bhushan Steel was the first company in India to emerge successfully out of bankruptcy. The banks had to take a 37% haircut on their dues considering rest as standard. Tata Steel and JSW Steel were major players in the Bhushan Steel deal. Even Liberty Steel participated but post the due date of the bid submission. So they took up the matter with NCLAT but was rejected by them. So the corporate insolvency solution process CIRP of Bhushan Steel was initiated on July 26, 2017 under the provision of IBC code. Tata Steel Limited submitted the resolution plan for Bhushan Steel. Neeraj Singhal, former MD of Bhushan Steel, had moved to NCLAT seeking stay on takeover by Tata Steel since NCLT didn't give them a resolution. But NCLAT rejected the appeal and then NCLT approved Tata Steel resolution plan on May 15, 2018. Tata Steel thus acquired 72.65% controlling stakes in Bhushan Steel Limited through its wholly owned subsidiary of Bhammipal Steel Limited. Wholly owned subsidiary of Bhammipal Steel Limited (BNL) through Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code (IBC). BNL was formed in January 2018 as a special purpose vehicle (SPV) to facilitate acquisition of then named Tata Steel BSL Limited. Rest 27.75% of Tata Bhushan Steel Limited share capital will be held by Tata BSL's existing shareholders and financial creditors who received shares in exchange of debt owed to them. The acquisition was funded by around 18,000 crore of Tata Steel's own capital, including internal generation, and around 16,500 crores of debt drawn on 100% owned subsidiary Bamnipal Steel that holds the equity of Bhushan Steel. Later in April 2019, Tata Steel merged BNL and TBSL into company by way of amalgamation with one share of Tata Steel for every 15 share held in TBSL. This acquisition has helped Tata Steel to produce more steel and turn around the business to a profitable one with expert Tata Steel management strategies. Now, if you see the results of Tata Steel, after acquisition of this Bhushan Steel, they have definitely increased the free cash flow of the business, and we can be sure that they will turn around the business into a much profitable one. So that gives you a real case scenario of what is NPA, what is NCLT, what is NCLAT, what is asset reconstruction company, and what is provisioning. Also, here in this Tata Steel case, there was no asset reconstruction company because the direct dealing was done by Tata Steel. Happy investing.